After Mike brought Zach last week, I'm just surprised and happy to see he showed up again. So Zach has made a firm stop and good future Rotarian. Today, Brett Carroll will be speaking and giving our annual economic report. We always appreciate you coming, Brett, and doing this. Brett is the CEO of Conway Corporation, a company that provides electric, water, wastewater, cable, internet, telephone, and security services to the city of Conway, Arkansas. Brett has been with Conway Corp for 23 years, first serving as the Chief Financial Officer, and now he's the CEO, has been for the last 4 years. Brett holds a BBA in accounting and an MBA from the University of Central Arkansas and is a certified public accountant. He is recognized by the American Public Power Association as a certified public power manager. Brett serves on a number of boards. He serves on the board of the American Public Power Association. He's the VP of Finance for the Arkansas Municipal Power Association, Arkansas 811, Conway Development Corporation, Opportunity Matters Arkansas, and the Conway Airport Advisory Board. He enjoys being involved in his community, and he has served on several nonprofit boards, including United Way, Rotary International, Conway Area Chamber of Commerce, Salvation Army, Gideon's International, Boys and Girls Club, and Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Brett and his wife of 31 years, Sandra, have a daughter, Caitlin, who is an elementary school teacher. They are active members of Second Baptist Church, where Brett serves as a deacon and teaches in the youth group. Please join me in welcoming Brett Carroll.
Thank you, Courtney. I appreciate that. It is my honor and privilege to continue this tradition. Thomas Wilson started this a number of years ago and did it for a number of years. And then UCA kind of took it over. Dr. Morris Lamberson did it for a number of years. And then Roger Lewis is still sort of our economic report emeritus. He always gives us insight and help as we're putting this together. And then Dr. Pat Cantrell did it a few years before I took it over in 2018. So I'm honored to be able to share this information with you and look forward to kind of talking through some of the data that we've seen over this past year through this pandemic. Hopefully you can see that. And as I'm going through this, there'll be time for Q&A at the end, but if you have questions as I'm going through, feel free to ask me. I also wanted to mention Monica Reed. I get to stand up here and talk about the data, but Monica does all the hard work. Monica, if you would stand up so they can see you. She's a CPA. She's been with us for 6 years and does a lot of good work for the corporation. But every year, getting ready for the economic report, she has to, and there's not like one repository where all this data exists. She's got to call a lot of people, search a lot of websites, and make phone calls to get some of this data. So I appreciate her making this happen. A lot of hard work on her part. So I want to talk about. Let me get out here where I can see. So we'll talk about GDP just a little bit. Gross domestic product is just really a measure of the economic output of all the goods and services of a particular country. It is a good measure of the economic health, and it's derived, calculated based on consumer spending, government spending, private business spending, and then our net economic exports. So if you've got a country where your citizens are spending money, producing goods and services that exceed the amount of goods and services that you export, it's probably, that you import rather, it's probably a good sign that your economy is growing and doing well. And obviously, you can see that in 2020, there was a big decrease, 3.5% as far as GDP is concerned. And that's probably no surprise to anybody that's the case, given what happened in 2020. And then unemployment. I'm gonna have to probably follow along on this piece of paper. That's tough for me to read. But unemployment, no surprise there that it jumped up as much as it did in the pandemic. There's some good news subsequent to that. In fact, I think I heard today that unemployment claims are at a post-pandemic low. So saw that today. So that is good news. And you might remember that when I did this a couple years ago, we talked about unemployment, how it was at an all-time low. It was as low as it had been since the Vietnam War. So a really strong economy, things are going really well. And then, of course, 2020 happened. We saw the average unemployment jump up 8.1% as far as our country is concerned. All right. And next we have the inflation rate, which measures inflation, deflation, really kind of takes a look at the economic policy of government, measures how well economic policy is being administered in our country. And, no surprise that there was a little bit of a decrease or not as big an increase in 2020 as compared to 2019 as far as inflation, as far as consumer price index is concerned. Now, this makes a lot of sense to me. If you look at this, these are the individual categories that were where there was a weighted average calculated to get that overall inflation rate of 1.4. And if you look through it, it just makes sense. I mean, if you look at that first one, apparel, I mean, how many of you did work the past 12 months in your pajamas? By show of hands, let's see. So a number of you did. I can count on one hand the number of times I've worn a tie, including today, over the past 14 months. And so not a lot of apparel purchases were made. As far as the energy is concerned, from a comic book perspective, our kilowatt hour sales were down 8.6% over 2019, or compared to 2019. So they dropped a good bit. In fact, our largest customer was shut down for 2 months, which was they're a huge consumer of electricity. And so that also contributed to the lower GDP that we saw across the country. We weren't surprised by that. As we were watching the pandemic first take place over in Europe, we saw electric load drop off. And so we knew that was going to happen here. And it certainly did. Probably more pronounced in Conway because we did have one customer in particular that did have to shut down. That happened across the country. So the fact that energy decreased is not a big surprise. And the same is true with transportation. I mean, you didn't drive very much. You stayed at home. You didn't travel very far. So all of those things make sense when you look at the baskets of goods and services that make up how they calculate consumer CPI. All right. The Dow Jones, what a really a remarkable slide right here. In March 23rd, the Dow dropped to 18,592, I believe, dropped pretty dramatically. And so if you have 401k plans, you were monitoring those 401k plans, you saw a huge loss in just a short period of time. But by the end of the year, it was up over 30,000 points. And today, I hadn't looked since mid-morning, but it was over 34,000 points. So really good indicator of our economy and how it's growing post-pandemic. And so really, when I looked at it at 1053, it was 34,424. So a lot of good growth there. If you've got investments, if you've got stock portfolios, then they're probably, the Dow takes 30 large customers and it's an index to measure how the stock market's performing. So if you've got some investment portfolios, then they're probably doing pretty well since the pandemic occurred. All right. Another really, there's a number of slides through here that, as a Conway resident, really are important to me and really stand out to me. This is one of them, which looks at the growth in population over the past few years. Now, my wife and I were married in 1990. From 1990 to 2020, 30 years, our population more than doubled, 2.5 times the population growth in Conway. And that, again, is another sign of a really strong economy. If you've been to communities where the population is going the other way, that's not a good thing. I think it's really a testimony to the diversity of our economy. If you look at the healthcare, our institutions of higher learning, the blue-collar jobs, the white-collar jobs that we have in Conway. I mentioned this to you, I think last year. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but I was really bullish on Conway's ability to withstand this pandemic, to make it through this pandemic, because of all the things I just mentioned. And there's a number of slides here that I believe support that theory anyway. So really good growth there. We haven't seen as much growth over the past few years, but certainly from 1990 to 2020, tremendous growth. A little too fast. Barber County births and deaths So there was a bigger gap between, there was more people being born than passed a few years ago, but still, there's still a net gain when you look at that. So still provide good growth for our community. You know, if you think about it, probably in your own families, people are getting married later, people are having kids later, and so probably not a surprise that we're seeing not as much gap between births and deaths in Faulkner County. All right, another interesting slide that just looks at the number of employers and the average annual wages in the city of Conway. So 60 employers in terms of government, private employers, 2,925. So almost 3,000 total employers. Total number of employees, 38,889 with an average annual wage of 42,692. And you know, I remember there was a time when, you know, Conway was described as sort of a bedroom community. That's really not the case anymore. There's a lot of industry here, a lot of jobs here. And obviously there are people who commute from Conway to Little Rock to work, but I don't think that's the case now as much as it once was. And that really is a good thing for our community and for our economy locally. Again, another good indicator, and this is the unemployment rate. You can see where it really spiked early in 2020 around the pandemic. You know, we got up to almost double digits, but then before the end of the year, it dropped down to about 3.5, 3.6%. So again, really bullish on our local economy and our ability to withstand these kind of events because of our economic diversity. And I really think this slide kind of supports that. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, report today that unemployment claims are at a post-pandemic low. So that's a really good sign for our country and our community. And again, another slide that shows unemployment kind of overlaid the state, local, compared to the national unemployment. Okay, cost of living. I think we've always enjoyed a really good value in Conway. Cost of living is relatively low here. And so if you look at it and assume that the national average is 100, and you compare the communities around us and some abroad and some in other parts of the country, you know, our composite is 82% of the national average. So, you know, almost 20 points lower to live here in Conway. And while, you know, we do take some pride in the contribution that low utility costs play into that, one of the biggest drivers is housing costs. That's one of the biggest drivers in Conway's housing costs. Now, I realize lumber prices are up, that went way up after this data was prepared, but a $266,000 house in Conway, 2,400 square feet. If you were to buy that same house in Manhattan, it's $2.3 million. That same house in DC is $1 million. So I know that if you own homes here for a while, you've seen those homes appreciate in value, but yet and still, Conway is still a really good place to live in terms of the cost to someone who's living. All right. So this will be more interesting next year. This is 2019 data. It's tourism, and so this reflects 2019. So we won't see the effects of that until we see the data next year. But I do have some slides later that shows hotel sales and restaurant sales, which will have a similar impact. I think we'll see in tourism when we look at this data next year. Violent crime, again, another probably important slide. If you live in Conway, violent crime is something that you want to be mindful of. And this is 2019 data. It's data that's provided by the FBI, but you can see that Conway compares very favorable to other communities in and around our state. So you can see we've actually had a decrease in violent crime compared to the previous year. I think us and Fayetteville were the only two cities that actually saw a decrease. Others saw increases in violent crime. So if this is a place that you're trying to raise a family and live, I think that's important data to understand. It's true of property crimes as well. Conway, again, compares very favorably. And so I appreciate the men and women of law enforcement that do what they do every day to help keep Conway a safe place to live. And so property crimes continue to be compare very favorably with other communities in our state. All right, just a pretty interesting slide here. You know, real property assessments of $1.6 billion in real property assessments. The thing that this astounded me was real estate sales, almost up 30% over the previous year. $695 million real estate sales. So if you need a loan, you know a real estate agent, might be a good time to check with them. They probably had a good year last year. So really pretty. And if you try to buy a house, they're hard to come by. The housing market is really it's a seller's market right now. There's a lot of people looking for homes. There's not a lot of inventory. So we see a lot of construction take place. I'll share another slide here in just a minute that kind of supports that. Another real positive slide for our community. All right. And that's this next slide here. It's building permits. And you can look and see some dramatic growth in 2020 over 2019 and over the past few years. That's some of the biggest growth we've seen. When people build a house, we have to talk to them so we can make sure that we've got electric hooked to them and water hooked to them when they build a new house. And so just a lot of growth in single family homes and multifamily dwellings, and the biggest growth we've seen since 2010. And really in 2010, the multifamily increase right there was related to one development. So when you pull that out and compare it all those years, 2010 or 2020 was a really good year as far as building permits. And you're seeing that now with construction around our community. So that's a very encouraging, positive slide. That's people working. It's wealth being generated for our community. And so that's a real positive indicator, I believe, for our slide, for our community. Oh, I don't know about this. This is kind of important. So a couple of things that I want to point out there, and you'll notice this is consistent with what I said earlier. Our revenue dropped in 2020. And you might be wondering, why is that? If you've got a growing community, why is your revenue drop? Well, we had drops in our electric flow. As I mentioned, we had some industrial customers that either didn't produce as much product or greatly reduced the product that they were producing because of the pandemic. And so our electric load dropped pretty dramatically. And that was 8.6% reduction in electric sales. And so our revenues are down in 2020, but we do expect, you'll notice, as far as capital expenditures are concerned, we're going from 18 billion to 26.9 billion, so almost $9 million of increases in capital expenditures this year. And some of that's because we cut or deferred projects, trying to protect our balance sheet in 2020. So we cut some things or deferred some things, and those things we're doing this year. But the other thing is there's a lot of connection there, correlation between the mayor's aggressive street plan and the infrastructure that we have under those roads. So to the extent that he's building new roads, what we're trying to do is to get ahead of them and either get those sewer lines and water lines replaced or relocated, so that when you put some new road in, we don't have to cut it when there's a main break. So that's driving a lot of that capital expenditures for Colony Corp. We believe, based on our estimates, we'll get the census data later this year, so we'll know for sure. But if we look at our kind of historical records and look at the number of people per meter, it's about 2.33 people per electric meter in our community, residential electric meter. We estimate that the population of Conway is 66,916 people. So I'll be curious to see how that compares to the actual census data. Another surprising slide, sales tax receipts. When we talked about this last year, we didn't know what sales tax was going to look like. And to see a 5% increase over the previous year is pretty impressive. Now, I realized, Roger and I were talking about it at lunch, but I realized that, there's a tax now on e-commerce that we used to not have. And that really helped us out, really made a difference. But I just think this is really encouraging to see this increase in sales tax revenue year over year, because I certainly didn't expect it for 2020. So I'm still really, really bullish on Conway about the rest of this year and years to come. And then again, estimated retail sales for 2020. I remember, Roger, I don't remember how many years ago it was, but I remember kind of the reveal one day was that we had become $1 billion economy. That's, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago, I'm guessing. Well, 2.2 billion is where we are right now, a $2.2 billion economy. So good growth here, and important. I mentioned this earlier. This is hotel sales. Not a lot of traveling this year. You can say they had a pretty big decrease, 19.1 million to 12.9 million. So a big decrease there in hotel sales. The same is true of restaurant sales. Saw a decrease there, which I think will have a similar impact on the tourism industry when we review that next year. But probably no surprise to anybody with those things tapered off during 2020. All right. Bank deposits. This one was really interesting to me when I look back at the year. So they increased 440 million, which was a surprise to me. 440 million from 2019 to 2020, almost 20% increase in bank deposits. A couple of things were driving that. There were a number of investors that got a little concerned about the stock market. They parked some of their money in banks to protect that cash, and didn't get much return on that investment, but certainly protected it from losses due to a volatile stock market. The other thing, you think about stimulus money, the payroll protection program money, all of that money came in and was parked in banks. And so those two things were the primary drivers of the increase in bank deposits in our community. So good increases there. That was a surprise to me, but glad to see it. Market share, always an interesting slide. Centennial Bank, in terms of bank deposits, 41%. First Security, 22.6%. RBS 6.1%. Regions, right a little over 6%. Simmons Bank, 5.88%, and all the others, 18.36%. So, a strong banking community. A lot of good banks in our community, and so I think that it's always interesting to see where those deposits are. In Arkansas, scholarship lottery sales. Since the inception in 2009, almost 5.3 billion in lottery sales since that time, and about $1 billion of that has been given. A little over $1 billion has been given in scholarships. So I think that's made a difference for people who otherwise hadn't had a chance to go to college, and so that's made a difference. And $3.83 per thousand is spent on lottery in our county. $3.83 per $1,000 is spent on the lottery in our county. And these are lottery sales per municipality, so you can see them broken down by Conway, Greenbrier, Mayflower, Bologna, Worcester, and Nolan number. So that just kind of breaks. I would suspect that some of the stimulus money, instead of getting deposited in banks, got spent here too. Would be my guess. All right, and then the final slide is on some data we've just been tracking recently, but medical marijuana sales, and so that's really a growing business. No pun intended, but really seeing some changes here, and so just to kind of put this in perspective, $6,500 about $6,500 per pound is what it goes for. And I thought, well, I'm not a farmer. I don't know what that means. But I looked at a pound of corn and a pound of soybeans to just kind of compare. Corn is 9 cents per pound, and soybeans are 18 cents per pound, based on my rough math. I don't know a lot about this industry, but somebody's making some money. So, with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have about these slides or anything else that you might have. Yes, Roger. I think real estate sales surprised me. Unemployment did as well. Real estate, unemployment, I didn't expect those things to do as well as they did. post-pandemic. I just did not. Those two things surprised me, I guess. And what it costs to buy medical marijuana. I was surprised by that. It's funny, I've got and by the way, we've got some detailed reports. If you want one, we can email it to you. If you'll give me a business card or Monica a business card, so we can get these reports emailed to you. But this actually has a name of some of the dispensaries, and they're pretty interesting. My favorite was the Relief Center, RELEAF Center. That was my favorite. We also have Fort Cannabis, that's in Fort Smith, and then Red River Remedy. So alliteration aside, I think that some of these businesses are making some money. So anyway, but yeah, we have copies of this full report. What you saw was just a select group of slides, but we've got the full report for you if you might want that. Any other questions? Yes.
Question. During the pandemic, a lot of children and adults were going to the hospital less.
That's right.
Our daughter used to go in for running here and there. We often not to do that. And I remember talking to her nutrition, very difficult conversation, but had to downsize the staff, and that was very difficult time for the healthcare here in Conway. I don't know if you can comment on that.
Yeah.
Businesses might have recovered.
Yeah, I really can't. I don't have a great deal of insight into healthcare. I think that given maybe some of the federal programs, I think both of our local hospitals fared pretty well. I think it was very scary to them early on in the pandemic. And if you look at it was the slide, I think, on, glance at it here, I believe it was the one on the inflation. Healthcare was one of those things that, medical care was one of those things that increased a little, but not very much. And so I think people put off some of those things that you talked about, going to the doctor. I mean, they were trying to preserve space for people who might catch COVID-19. So I think early on it's pretty tough. But
along those same lines, I was thinking of Colorado yesterday. Their testing department, because all the COVID testing coming in, exploded 600%. So where you missed your pediatrician, because you didn't want to take your child in there were other areas of the hospital that absolutely exploded because of COVID.
yeah, I think that's right. I looked at a hospital's financial statements and saw that for 2020 their net income exceeded what they budgeted. So I presume that a lot of it has to do with, they probably had some losses in areas that they didn't expect, but they had some gains in areas that they didn't expect either.
At the same time, my twins are nurse, and I was with a number of nurses last night by chance, and they were talking about they went on unemployment for the first time in their entire lives during that April-May timeframe because the hospital literally shut down all excessive elective surgeries, and so your outpatient surgery and your outpatient services in general went down significantly.
Yeah.
And
Are they back working now?
Oh, yeah, they were literally all for 30 to 60 days, and they went on unemployment. They were totally embarrassed by it. I said, well, you can't be embarrassed by it because
Sure.
who would have dreamt?
Sure.
The healthcare workers would have been out in a pandemic.
Yeah, they.
Brett, let me ask you,
Yep.
we've just seen so many changes that's happened, but what I think is that we haven't really touched upon is basically the cars. Basically going from traditional fuel over to electric and so on. But how do you think that might affect us, and especially Conway?
In the community?
Yeah.
I think that's something I'd be planning for. I mean, when you look at all the projections that have existed in the past about when they're going to have, when the adoption of electric vehicles is going to be, they say by 2021, we're going to have X percent of people driving electric vehicles, and they've always been on, they've always been high. But I think we're getting closer to that. I mean, it's kind of the chicken or the egg. I mean, you put in charging stations, then you get the cars, you buy cars, and there's a drive. But it will change our distribution system, how we handle and distribute electricity. So it definitely have an impact. It's something we got to be thinking about, right? Because it'll probably be adopted slower in the state of Arkansas than other states around us, East Coast, West Coast. But I think it'll be adopted in college sooner than it will in those states because you've got a young population, you've got 3 colleges, and you'll have it pretty quick here. There you go. Congratulations, Joan. I meant to say that at the beginning, but I've been in this club for 23 years, and Joan was one of the finest presidents we ever had. So congratulations.
Thank you for so much, Monica. Thank you all for putting this together. It's wonderful. This is always one of my favorite presentations of the year, to see this information. It's kind of odd being up here. I haven't been up here in a while, so it's kind of fun, actually. Just kidding. I want to thank everybody for coming. We have so many guests today. We appreciate each one of you coming. If you do not have an application, we would love for you to get the application, fill that out, become a member. We'd love to have you. We have lots of exciting things coming up. The football program being new to us, that we're going to need lots of new hands and on the ground. So we welcome to join us for that as well. Next week is our outstanding 8th graders. So I do invite you back for that. That's another one of our really fun events of the year, is to be able to honor 8th graders from all the schools in the county. So that's going to be a fun one. Seating is limited, so be wary of, we may kick you out the door, but hopefully that will. Next week we're going to do that, and then I guess that's all we have. Are there any other announcements from the floor? All right, well, then if we would. Fred asked me something about my grandkids while ago, and I'm like, here, Fred, I have grandkids. But I do get called Nana a lot at school now. I'm not so crazy about that. If you would, please stand. We're going to adjourn with the 4-way test. Of all the things we think, say, or do, is it true?